really happy to be involved in the Niagara Community Foundation. I served as a board member with the foundation from 2009 to 2013, and during that time I learned a great deal about the role the foundation plays in connecting donors to charitable organizations that are near and dear to their hearts. In 2011, I'm very proud to say that the Wainfleet Community Fund was launched. That came about with a lot of support from the Township of Wainfleet, leadership and guidance from Liz Palmieri, who was our past executive director, and from members of the community. I'm currently chair of that Wainfleet Community Fund. I, along with a couple of committee members, we're few but we're mighty, Sharon Swope, who is here today, and Dan Bouchard, along with them, and the guidance and leadership from Suzanne Deenstra, who is our staff liaison at the foundation. We focus our efforts in ways in which we can raise awareness about this fund, how our community can benefit from this fund, and support our community, not only today, but in the future. The creation of this fund has provided an opportunity for those in the community, or I think of it as a vehicle as well, in which one can give back to those charitable organizations in the community that mean a lot to them. That's exactly what my husband and I did. When this fund was established, I felt very strongly about it and continue to do so today, and we wanted to lead by example. So we are proud to say we established the first named family fund with the foundation. Today's focus is leading me into that. Philanthropy in our communities, giving back made easy. The conversation this morning will walk us through the ins and outs of planned giving and ways in which you can meet both your financial and philanthropic goals. To help us guide us through that today, we have 4 guest speakers who have generously offered their time to come today and share their knowledge, their experience, and their expertise in these areas. So I'm going to introduce each one of those individuals, and we're going to start with Ken Seidel. Ken Seidel, thank you for coming today. Ken is from Meridian. He brings over 30 years of experience in financial services, the last 12 as a financial planner. By using a holistic approach to financial planning, I want to learn more about that, he helps ensure that people are able to reach all their most important goals. Whether it's about enjoying retirement, saving on taxes, transferring wealth to the next generation, or leaving a legacy, Ken can be an integrated part of your team, working with other professionals to help to ensure you achieve what's best for you. I'm going to come to you last. Gary Talassi. Gary, save the best for last. Gary Talassi is a senior financial planner with Optimized Wealth Management in Port Colborne. Gary was born and raised and still lives in Welland. Gary graduated from the University of Waterloo, majoring in math and economics. And after that, he worked in middle management at John Deere Welland Works until '86. Then he participated in a voluntary quit program and began to build his financial planning practice in '87. Gary has operated from his office on Clarence Street in Port Colborne since 1995. He has been involved in the community, including being past president of the Port Colborne Wainfleet Chamber of Commerce, and is currently serves on the Port Colborne Community Fund Committee. Thanks for being here today, Gary. Next to Gary is Chris Wilson. Chris Wilson is a Port Colborne born partner in the law firm Wilson Optofsky. Chris was educated in Port Colborne Public Schools and graduated from Western University with his law degree in 1978. He practiced in Toronto until '87 and then came back home to Port Colborne to join Beverly Davis and William Ebert in their long-established practice in Port Colborne. In 1991, he was joined by Margaret Optofsky, and they have practiced together since. His practice is restricted to real estate, estate administration, will, and trust preparation. He has served on the executive of the Welland County Law Association, on the boards of the Port Colborne General Hospital, the Niagara Community Foundation, Forest Niagara, and Central Church in Port Colborne. Thanks for being here today. Bryan. What can you say about Bryan?
Briefly.
Bryan, I have to cut your bio in
Yeah,
half.
thank God. Thank God. More than small.
Bryan is our current executive director of the Niagara Community Foundation, and he has been so since 2016. His professional journey began at his alma mater, Ridley College, in a number of roles, including acting director of development, and he also spent 2 years as senior development officer, which handles major gifts and capital campaigning with the Mohawk College Foundation. He holds an honor of Bachelor's in Arts and History and Political Science from Western University, and a Master's of Arts and Leadership from the University of Guelph. That Bryan brings a great deal to the foundation, and I will say we were, when I was on the board, Liz Palmieri had been our executive director for many years. We were all really worried about who was coming in next because he had big shoes to fill. And I got to commend you. You've done a fantastic job with the foundation. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Great, Kelly.
All right.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here and for braving the weather. We hope to be here till around 11 o'clock, and then the Polar Bear Dipping Club is coming for their swim. The four of us up here, we want this to be interactive. So I've got a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask our team here to provide their expertise. We've got two financial managers, one from sort of an institutional background with the credit union side, and obviously Gary from a private organization, and their different experiences, and obviously Chris on the legal side, right? These are allied, what we refer to in our sector as allied professionals, people that help you make the right decisions for your family and your situation. These people are happy to help you, and if you have already a financial planner and a lawyer, etc., a portfolio manager, they're here to help you. But these gentlemen and myself have some insight, and we want to share that with you. So we're thrilled that you're here with us today. If you have any questions, feel free to just kind of quickly raise your hand. I'll try to identify you and then fire it out, because we want this to be more of a discussion, not just four talking heads. So please be part of this. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. We've got members of the Wainfleet community group, the Port Colborne group as well, Community Fund Committee, which is great. And Don Stewart is actually the chair of our Grimsby Fund Committee, but Don also lives part-time in Wainfleet, so he's got Grimsby and Wainfleet, so he's got 2 feet in these wonderful communities. So we're going to get going, and my first question is for Ken, because we teed it up, and then Ken, you talked in your little bio about holistic planning. Can you fill us in on that and your perspective, and then we'll get the others to kind of tune in as well.
Sure. Holistic planning at the very core is basically just trying to get a more complete picture of what you want to do with your money today, tomorrow, and in the future. It's probably best explained by an example. A colleague of mine met with a couple a few years ago. They heard that Meridian gives free second opinions on financial plans, and they were concerned because they had another financial plan already, and they went to this financial planner to make sure that their money was going to last through retirement. And he did a great financial plan for them, showed them, yeah, your money will last, you'll still have like $250,000 left at the end of your life, right? And they thought, well, this is really good. And so they went away, and part of their wealth was a GIC that was due to mature shortly, and it was worth about $250,000. And they decided to take that money, since they didn't need it at the end of their plan, to help the children out with down payments on their mortgages, to bring those under control, and also make a gift to charity, because he had gotten a big bonus that year, and they wanted to reduce taxes. Then when they met him for a follow-up meeting, we saw that maybe the GIC was coming, do whatever, called them in for a follow-up meeting. They sat down and reran the numbers, and then showed them the plan that now they were several $100,000 short on their financial plan. And they thought that, what went wrong? Before we had lots of money to do this, and now we don't. And I said, well, what did your financial planner say when you told them that you were going to take some of that money and give it to your children and some to charity? And they said, well, we didn't tell our financial planner. I said, well, why not? It wasn't me, actually, sorry, it's my coworker. And what they told my poll worker was, never ask. So that's my job, is to make sure that I understand all of the players involved in your life, your children that you might want to provide for, elderly parents that you might be caring for in their old age, maybe a disabled cousin, that sort of thing. Get a complete picture so that we understand what the possibilities are. And then when those decisions need to be made, that we work in partnership and that I'm treated as a trusted partner in making those decisions. And to me, that's really what holistic planning is all about. Does that explain it?
Yeah.
Gary, do you have any thoughts in your role and what you do? And I know you work with clients. I've worked with you with some of your clients. And any thoughts on your holistic?
Yeah, I agree with Ken that you should always be looking at the complete picture. And your financial planner is really only as good as your doctor. So when you go to your doctor and you have a sore elbow, if he just jumps into giving you pills for that sore elbow, but you don't talk about your knee being sore and you're allergic to this and you've had a surgery on your back and all of those kinds of things, then the doctor is probably missing the point when he prescribes something for your elbow discomfort. It needs to be part of the whole picture. And so, you may have a GIC that's maturing. Well, you shouldn't be looking at that in isolation. It should be part of your whole financial picture and be taking into account all of the dreams and goals that you and your spouse have for your family. So, yes, you need to look at the whole picture.
Chris, any comments from your perspective on
Well,
that?
as a lawyer, it's basically part of our due diligence and our legal responsibilities to our client is to ask those questions. But every once in a while, people sometimes resent, having the lawyer ask what do you need to know about that for? That's none of your business. But particularly in an estate plan, it can very much relegate, if you have a child with a disability, then you may not be doing that child any favor by making them a generous gift in your will, because they may end up losing their benefits. There are and structures and abilities you can do. So that you do need to open up to your lawyer and make sure that when they're asking all of those questions about, why are you asking about that? Because that's none of your business. Well, it's part of the process of ensuring that your estate plan then covers your situation. So hopefully it comes out, but sometimes you can miss it when, or another, I've had, recently another law firm did the will. There's a large benefit for the child, and the child is receiving Ontario Disability Support benefits. If they inherit more than $40,000, they're going to lose their benefits. They lose their drug coverage, which is even more of a problem. So, careful planning needs to understand the whole picture.
Exactly, and I think from my perspective, from the philanthropic sector, what I'm finding more and more in my career, in the conversations I have with people that want to support the Niagara Community Foundation, as an example, that their lawyers and their portfolio managers and their financial planners are being much more holistic in having those much larger conversations for the full benefit of you. So you're not missing anything. So you're not making a decision, as Chris said, that could actually harm someone in your family down the road. So these are great. Yes, sir. You had a quick question.
There's, you mentioned about gifts to children, maybe to buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
Would it not be beneficial to talk to a lawyer in terms of having something drawn up so that you just don't give it as a gift, but as a loan that they have to pay back in case there's a split in the couples? And
Chris?
before I go on, I just want to say to Gary, thank you for letting me retire at 55. And investing my money wisely. I appreciate that.
And I'd like to remind you, Larry, it was your money. I never gave you any money, just so you know.
There you go.
Well, I thought you did. I'm going to
Chris, did you want to? Good
Sure, to
question.
answer your first question, and there are lots of complications and particularly some pitfalls in, parents providing money to children as an advance. You just get down to the issue, is it a gift or is it a loan? And lots of lawyers have made lots of money in Canada over the last 15, 20 years over that very issue, where as a result of a change in circumstances, matrimonial split up, one of the parties is saying, no, that was a gift from mom and dad, and the mom and dad are saying, no, that's a loan because that was only to our son, it wasn't to the daughter-in-law. So it can be very tricky. The other difficulty is most lenders, that is, to get your new first mortgage, you have to establish that you have a down payment. So usually it's 20% in order to get a fully uninsured mortgage. If it's less than that, then you need to get mortgage insurance through CMHC or some other lender. But you can't then have borrowed the down payment. And people come, every once in a while will say, well, we're going to tell the lender that's a gift, but between us and the kids, that's really a loan. You can't do that. That's a big word, and that's called fraud. And when the lender then turns around and the mortgage comes up for renewal and they find that there's a second mortgage registered, then you've got in trouble. So it is a very tricky situation that you should be seeking legal advice right from the outset. And parents are always quite desirous of trying to make sure that they treat their children fairly, which in their mind means equally. And I've had lots of discussions with parents very often where fair isn't necessarily equal and equal isn't necessarily fair. And each situation needs to be looked at and dealt with, so that it's not always as easy, just sign a promissory note or register a second mortgage. There can be other consequences when you're dealing with loans interfamily. But I do strongly recommend to people, treat money like business. Might still be family, but if it's a gift, say it's a gift. If it's a loan, say it's a loan, because otherwise you're going to be making money for lawyers after you're gone.
Patrick.
Thank you. And Chris, I put a slight tilt on it. The way I've heard it is what's fair and what's legal are often very different things. But one of the things, and it was, you sort of raised it or been part of the conversation below, is individuals' sense of how can I have faith in this process? How can I trust that I'm getting good advice? And a wise person once said, integrity is something people do when no one else is watching. What is it about your respective disciplines that assures that there's the integrity, the ethics associated with the law society or financial planning is underlying and should be everything you do?
Well, I mean, for me, I've got the Law Society of Ontario looking over my shoulder, for one, and they are very aggressive in enforcing the ethical responsibilities of lawyers. People may not believe that, but I see the reports. I deal with the auditors. They show up at my office and they go through my files and review and make sure that, big issue these days, and it's all over the press again, and I don't know how it continues to happen, is client identification. When your lawyer is asking for a copy of your driver's license, please don't be offended. People get upset with me. You've known me for 50 years. Well, that doesn't matter anymore. And you see what's been going on out of Toronto, where people are finding their house has been sold because there's been fraudulent ID. There's been no upshot. I mean, there was certainly a lawyer or maybe two lawyers involved in all of those transactions, but we're just human as well, and sometimes these sophisticated frauds can be done so. So I mean, that's the biggest one. The other one is lawyers. Yes, we're insured. We have to keep our errors and omissions insurance in place, so if there is an error made, then the client is made whole as a result of the insurance. And you live in a small town in a community. There's not an awful lot you can get away with without it coming back to rebound at some point somewhere. So,
Gary, how about you?
I agree with most of the stuff Chris said. In fact, there isn't anything I disagree with. On the financial planning side, we have rules to follow also. Anti-money laundering rules are critical, and that's why we're asking for a current ID and a void check from your financial institution, the accounts that you have with them. In money laundering, we rely on the financial institutions as the first step for money to get into the system. So because we don't have deposit accounts or checking accounts, we're relying on those financial institutions, and that's why we have to provide a copy of your banking information with them. The portfolio management firm that we deal with has rules that we have to follow. There's a compliance department with strict rules about account opening and who you take direction from. You know, a lot of the frauds in our business happen because the advisor gets an email and says, I'm out of the country and I just changed banks, but I need $50,000 from my investment sent to this account. There's about 3 or 4 red flags there right off the bat, right? But you know, you need to stay diligent and keep checking on this stuff. We also have errors and omissions insurance that we need to keep up to date. And you know, my dad was a cop in Welland, so I have a family reputation to keep pristine. So.
Ken, how about you from the institutional side? Yeah?
No cops in my background. But yeah, similar to the others, we all have to carry errors and omissions insurance. I wear 2 hats, one with Meridian, so all the same banking industry regulations apply to us as far as money laundering, et cetera. And we have you know, our compliance departments to make sure we're up to date on that. On the investment side, I'm licensed through IROC, which is the Investment Industry Organization of Canada, regulatory organization in Canada. And through them, they basically monitor all our trades, make sure that they're compliant. The financial planning aspect is actually monitored through those compliance departments as well, to make sure that when we're providing comprehensive plans that they're up to snuff, that we're using, you know, proper numbers for projections and not giving you some pie in the sky rates of return that aren't really achievable.
Bernie Madoff.
Yeah. You know, that sort of thing. So yeah, I've got compliance departments looking over my shoulder on both sides of the business. A regular, you know, CE credits are required. That's continuing education, both on the banking side and financial planning side as well, to make sure that we're staying current with affairs, you know, changes in law, etc. Often, you know, before you go see your lawyer, you've actually talked to a financial planner first, and that's why, you know, in my bio I mentioned about being part of a team. Is that I'm only one person, and you might need the expertise of many other people. Like, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't set up your trust for you. You're going to have to go see a lawyer for that. I'm not going to write your will for you. You got to go see a lawyer for that. I'm not going to do the books for your business, right? I can take that into account from the financial planning perspective and explain that there's certain ramifications, but your accountant's still going to take care of doing the books and that sort of thing. And we have insurance agents for insurance when that's an important part of your plan as well.
Great. Just quickly on the philanthropic side, for us there are a couple of important checks and balances. Number one is we are CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency, so we are a registered charity with the CRA. So every year we have our own third-party audit as well. So our auditors report all of our information to our board, and then that goes through CRA. So if there's anything not above board, we could potentially lose our CRA status. So obviously we do everything above board. We are also accredited with Amending Canada, which is the Philanthropic Standards Association across the country, and it's a gold standard. So every year I have to go through a compliance checklist, and every couple of years I have to do a full reaccreditation. So I have to go through all of our practices, business practices, financial practices, etc., and resubmit all of that. I get to do that this spring. Yay! But that's one of the things that we do to give confidence to the people that want to support us, that make those charitable donations through the Niagara Community Foundation, to know that your money is properly stewarded and is doing what you've asked it to do with us. And finally, all three of these gentlemen have said it, reputational risk. Niagara is a small, wonderful place. If you make mistakes or are somewhat careless, that gets around the community very quickly. For me, I like the fact that we're small and that good reputations travel well, but there's that downside. So we keep our noses, pretty straight and narrow. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it was mentioned about Wainfleet's involvement with, I guess, when you was talking, Wainfleet has a division of.
We have a community fund that is held like under the umbrella or within the Niagara Community Foundation, and every municipality in the region now has their own community fund.
That's right.
Okay, just on that, this is my first opportunity to see this. I'm quite impressed with all the funds and monies collected. Where in Wainfleet is their money distributed out then, or is that?
Yeah.
Is it in here?
So there is a granting, so what happens is we have granting programs that charitable organizations apply to for funding, and we have a grants committee that review all those grants and the money is allocated. So there is a process in which the money has to be requested and received.
So there's a good question. So here in Wainfleet, for example, there have been a number of projects that the Community Foundation has funded based on requests from, for example, the Township of Wainfleet or the Historical Society or things of that nature. So there's a set of bleachers. There's
Our cenotaph,
the cenotaph
the
was
building of our
sponsored.
cenotaph was a big community project that was supported through the foundation. And I think it was a grant of $7,500. So we have our Wainfleet Community Fund, and then we have our greater pool of Niagara, our Niagara Fund, and the monies are pooled, right?
It's all together.
So it's all invested together.
Yes.
But if, for instance, a cenotaph, we probably I think we have over 30,000 now that's identified as Wainfleet Fund money. So the interest on that, if you apply, like the cenotaph was, if there was maybe only $700-800 in the Wainfleet Fund, that's the first, if I understand it correctly, it's like the first money that
That's right.
against
That's
that
allocated.
$7,500. But the general fund then paid for the rest of the donation.
Maybe I can ask it another way. There's, I take it there is one of the things through this whole program is gifting and learning how it goes. You can gift money and stuff.
Yes.
There is a gifting money. Like to say, I'm from Wainfleet.
Mm-hmm.
There is, so I would like my money to stay.
Stay in
You can do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can do that.
And
That's
that's
right.
exactly,
That's
exactly why all these individual funds were created for each municipality, because some people do want to give back to just certain, you can be very specific or you can be very general about how you want to and where you want your money to go. But that is specifically why these individual community funds were created, for those donors who want to keep their money in the place that they
Home is where the heart is.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. I'm happy to chat further with you about that for sure.
Take some money.
Provide, yeah. Definitely. Your wallets are already going. Yeah. So, and one thing I would like to, just generally speaking as well, obviously the Niagara Community Foundation, I refer to us as the Switzerland of charities, because we work with and support so many other charitable organizations. The main difference for us is our endowed funds. So we've got for the sake of round numbers, $75 million. We invest that. It's then the investment revenue that is granted out, to certain charitable sectors, to certain specific charities, or also geographically, municipally, right? So to Wainfleet or Grimsby or Niagara on the Lake. However the donor, we can make that happen. We work with our fund holders, so you choose where you want your money to go, and we deploy the funds. But I also just want to say, it's not just necessarily about the Niagara Community Foundation. The things the general principles we're talking about today, about how you work with your portfolio manager, your financial planner, your lawyer, it can be any charity that you wish, right? So at the end of the day, if you have a philanthropic goal, you work with your allied professionals and make that selection within your estate plan. So that could be community care, that could be the Historical Society, whomever you choose, that's up to you. The Niagara Community Foundation, we often get called by these gentlemen because we are Switzerland, because we work with so many charities, and you can choose in one breath to give your money to the Historical Society, to Brock University, and the Terry Fox Foundation. and we take care of all of that for you. So that's why a lot of people partner with us. Yeah, so that's how that works. Chris?
I just wanted to kind of illustrate how I got to the Community Foundation. Back in the 90s, I had an estate where I hadn't drawn the will, but the deceased person had basically no family. Single man, no children, no extended family, wanted to give back to his community. So he made a very large bequest to a national organization that does wonderful work across Canada, on the condition that they use that money in the city of Port Colborne. And the national organization, actually, we sent them the check, and then they sent it back. Because they said, we don't have any program in Port Colborne at the moment. And I said, that's a travesty. That's not what he wanted to do. So what I find and why I've been a big supporter, I was introduced to the Community Foundation not too long after by Roseanne Marsh and Liz Palmieri. And I bought into it immediately because that's exactly the organization, because it's local. Your money stays local. My second illustration was another client who wanted to support her church, but had found over the years, looking at her church, and I agree that being a trustee and a treasurer and the chair of finance of my own church, is that you give a lot of money to a church at once, it's as big of a problem as not having any money. Because people in the church say, oh, I don't have to give anymore. I don't have to work anymore. So she didn't want that to happen. And many people in many mainline churches, we see it all over the place now in our communities, are closing. So she said, oh, I don't want my money then to go off to some national organization. I want it to remain local. What she did was she set up a fund with a community fund saying, this is the money out of the earnings each year. I want it to go to my congregation. So she's essentially still making her tithe, even though she's been gone for 5 or 6 years. And it's a substantial amount of money that comes in each year to that organization. And the congregation still has to do the work, still has to do their own fundraising, still has to do their own programs. But this is just like she was still here and making her weekly or monthly donation.
And God forbid that church closes down, her heirs can change the direction.
Not this one. It's up to it's the community.
Depends
foundation.
on,
That
depends
money-
on the.
But it would be
This
up to
one-
the community fund at that
The
point?
community, her agreement with the community fund then specifies.
That if the church goes defunct or
Then
whatever,
either to another, again, I think in her case, it's another congregation of the same denomination, or ultimately,
Right.
if there isn't anybody in Niagara left, then it would go to the discretionary grants program so that her money stays in Niagara.
right. So, for example, my mother-in-law has a significant affiliation with a specific charitable cause and wants to leave a chunk of her estate to that charitable cause. But again, God forbid, that charity goes through a scandal, a financial whatever it happens to be, it's done. If she does it all at once, it's done. But if she puts it into the Niagara Community Foundation, and correct me if I'm wrong, and creates a fund that is directed to give to that charity until a point at which then gives specific direction as to what happens
Exactly.
in that case.
Off-ramps.
Then she's in perpetuity supporting the charitable cause she wanted to. But if something happens, it can then go to support charities that are similar or
Whatever she chooses.
Whatever she
or what
chooses.
her heirs
Yeah.
what her heirs think would have been grandma's
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah, yeah.
Claudia?
When I opened my fund in honor of my parents, they had associated themselves with their free time with children. So it's directed towards children's projects. But I think the one thing that's nice too is my money stays in perpetuity and is, at the discretion of the foundation. Then it goes out and supports the programs that I want it to, which is children. So that's another aspect. I don't have to think about it. They do it.
We do all the work for you. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, so here's a big question. Gary, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. So someone's hypothetical or real life situation. I'd like to give more money, but I also need to pay for my current lifestyle. How do I do both? How can we provide for our financial needs throughout the rest of our lifetime, but also leave some assets for the next generation and leave some assets to the next generation, but still contribute to charitable causes that, like the Niagara Community Foundation or whatever their passions.
Okay. I liken that question to a bit of a puzzle. So there are only three things that are going to happen with your money. Number one, it's going to run out before you and or your partner pass away. Does anyone in this room want that to happen? The second thing is, your money runs out exactly the same day that the last of you and your partner pass away. What are the chances of that happening? Almost none, right? So what you need to plan for is that when the last of you and your partner pass away, there's money left over. And so if you have children and family you want to leave it to, that's part of your plan. But a good financial planner will always make very conservative estimates as far as growth rate on your investments, inflation and how that's going to affect what your costs are, whether you're going to have to pay for care for one or both of you in your later years. I mean, those are all variables that come into it, but the bottom line is it's best to have a plan that has money left over at the end. And so that's where you can allocate money to your family, to your heirs, but you can also consider some of the charitable causes that are near and dear to you and your partner. I must admit, I'm born and raised in Welland, still live there, and it bothers me that the large communities in the peninsula tend to get more attention and more money than the smaller communities, which is one reason why I love the Niagara Community Foundation. My wife and I have established two funds, one in Welland, because that's where we're both born and raised and still live, and one in Port Colborne, because in 1995, when I moved here to open my financial planning practice, the community of Port Colborne embraced me. People looked beyond, oh, wow, this guy's from Welland and he's not going to be here long, so, we're not going to support him. And so we established two funds, and we know that money will, number one, be invested in perpetuity, so only the growth from that money will be doled out. The Welland Fund money will go to causes in Welland. The Port Colborne Fund money will go to causes in Port Colborne. And my wife and I don't need to do anything else except contribute the money, because it's invested well through the Niagara Community Foundation. And the Niagara Community Foundation has a system where they get grant applications, and they measure the merits of each of them, and they decide how best that money should be allocated within the community.
Ken, do you want to make quick comments and then we'll come to that? Just on that question of, can I do both? How do I do my current lifestyle, but then also, with my estate?
Yeah, well, I guess that's where I go back to holistic planning. That's why there's no old adage in financial planning that if you fail to plan, well, then you plan to fail. And so that's really what it starts with. And if we have the big picture of what you want your money to do for you today, in the future, and at the end of your time, well, then we can formulate a plan that's going to achieve all those goals, right? And we can assign priorities to them to make sure that you achieve your most important. So if giving is an important one, well, then we'll build it into the plan. And for some people, that means that then maybe they're not gonna have quite as grand a lifestyle in retirement as they might otherwise want, but no, they really wanted to give back to that cause because it was important, because that cause supported their child when they were in need, that sort of thing, right? So really, that's what it comes down to for me.
Chris, any comments on that?
I quote your predecessor, and it was a way of analyzing it that appealed to me, that yes, you want to provide for your family, you want to provide for your 4 children. Well, if you're also adding a charitable aspect, consider it as planning for 5 children, one of which is your charity that you want to support, so that you can do all of this planning and then incorporate it as part of that plan, but use that as a mindset. Not that it comes off the top, but it's just part of what you want to leave, the legacy you want to leave, both to your family, and in this case to your community, or to whatever other charitable organization that you want to benefit.
Yeah, there's, in relation to someone here today that might want to maybe start something from what they've heard, does that mean, A, they have to change their will? And if they have to change their will, then, or add a codicil, or the language that's required, do you supply certain language or suggested language, or does that come from dealing with a lawyer to, I mean, that's going to cost us extra too, so for somebody.
This is where I would normally say sometimes you talk to your financial planner before your lawyer, because it comes down to, for me, when you want to do that. If you want to give at the end of your life, then that's fine, and maybe that's the approach that you take. But some people want to see their wealth doing good today while they're still alive. And there's other ways to accomplish that on a tax efficient basis. And maybe you want to talk to, a financial planner about what that looks like. And then if needed, then I'll refer you to a lawyer and say, yeah, but then here's what, what else you want to take care of with your lawyer.
So if good point, Ken, and at the end of your, in your state, you would need to do some minor amending to your will if you were adding a charitable beneficiary to it. We provide that wording. Actually, I think Chris probably wrote it for the foundation. All of those years
predated my time.
It did predate you, so. But yes, we could provide that, and a lawyer can then. Will there be some investment in that to get your will and your estate plan to where you would like it? Sure, there's probably some minor information, but with a fund holder like Gary, we have a fund agreement between the Niagara Community Foundation and Gary and his family. And that becomes part of your estate plan, along with the codicil in your will saying, the donor wishes that X amount of money or X percentage of the residual of my estate will go to the Niagara Community Foundation for the established, Smith Family Fund, and it's just a paragraph, and that goes in. And so when the executor or executrix of your estate is executing your wishes at that point, that is part and parcel of, it's the checklist that the lawyers will go through. So there is some minor investment to do that in the estate part, but Ken's got a great point. If you'd like your money to go into the charitable sector now, so you can see it, that's another benefit, and there are strong tax benefits for doing that right now. Sharon.
I can give you an example. We just established a family fund, Swab Aldrich Family Fund, and our choice was, and because of my background in nonprofit and working in a nonprofit in the region, we chose to, it was my direction, but we chose to, half of it goes to the Wainfleet Fund and the other half goes to, into the general Niagara Fund, just because I know that agencies also work, do things behind the scenes, and I just wanted to split it that way. And it was a matter of just setting it up with, just with Bryan, and that was.
One-stop shopping.
Yeah, we were afforded the opportunity to be able to do that now rather than later, and that certainly met a goal that I had after being on the board for 6 years and chair of the committee and all of those things. Mm-hmm.
Chris, did you want to comment further on Larry's point?
Well, I just, as a fund holder as well.
Yes, yeah.
They make it very easy. And so mine, I set up years ago because my father was a physician in Port Colborne, and I set it up. It basically is a legacy to my parents and their role in the community. It comes off on a credit card, it's $100 a month. You don't even notice it. And it's been, I don't know, 10 or 12 years. I mean, now it's starting to look like real money. But that's what you can do, and it has no effect on my estate or my will. When I pass, that will end, and the fund will then be closed off, or there may be other contributions that other people seek to make. But it's a very flexible way of doing it, and that, again, my fund as well, I wanted it to go to the discretionary grants. And Sharon just said, you may say, oh, I want it in Wainfleet, or I want it in Port Colborne. But there's lots of region-wide organizations that provide services in Port Colborne. They may not have their head office. The Y is one. They provide lots of the youth programs in our communities now. But there's one Y now for all of Niagara. But you can then support children's programs or whatever else through the Y. Community Living is one that is in Port Colborne and does great work. Port Cares. Pastoral Mental Health, another one. Region-wide, excellent facility that you could support. But that's strictly up to you and how you want to set it up.
As a financial planner, I would like to remind Chris that $100 12 years ago is worth a lot more than that now. So you should be upping your monthly.
Thank you, Gary. I'm going to buy you lunch later. Sure.
The other thing that kind of hinged, was Semi brought out is, so I've created this fund, but I can still annually add to
That's
it.
right.
Or monthly or whatever, I can still continue, or other people can make donations to that, other family members say can make donations to that, and people also, you often hear, or we hear, about people having anniversary events and things like that. Instead of buying me something, make a donation to my fund type of thing. We hear those things.
Yes, Patrick.
Just if the flexibility discussion, I think that's important. And it can be as broad or as narrow as one wants it. I don't know, maybe Sharon or Kelly can talk about this. Carol Leopard, what she did, which I think is really a fine story.
So Carol Leopard, you're going to fill in at my miss. When Carol wanted to enhance, she was a teacher here in Wainfleet and had taught at 2 different schools, and she wanted to enhance the music experience in schools. So she left the money split between 2 schools.
Yeah, I think so.
And,
Yes.
and then continues. One was Winger and the other one was
I think Steel Street.
Steel Street
yeah.
School. And so money goes annually to those schools to develop, enhance, enrich students in the area of music. And so that's a lifelong legacy that she left for the children in the community. Now, the schools in Wainfleet are merging, so there'll be one school. So William E. Brown and Winger, so then it'll go probably to that, just that
It'll
one
go to that
school,
one
and it'll just go with that. So that's part of the transition thing that we see happening when things shift, when organizations change.
There's we're sort of talking around. So there are financial benefits to these estate plans. So Ken, do you want to start maybe just generally, maybe even specifically speaking, the financial benefits that whether it's an estate plan or, so for example, you've had a family business or a family property that you're selling. What's going to happen? Well, the government's going to want to take a chunk of that. If you make some charitable donations, you can use those receipts to offset some of that expenditure. Can you comment on that generally?
Sure, I'll do my best.
Yeah.
Not sure what the question is.
Well,
because a lot of people think of the benefits in financial terms. But it's not just financial terms.
Right.
What I mean by that is, there's certainly every aspect of financial planning. Sometimes you'll see a model, and tax planning is like one of the things that we do. Whereas to me, that's the core, right? So there's always that financial ramification of any other aspect of your financial plan, whether it's the estate plan or the retirement plan or whatever. And that's what we're here to help with. So yeah, there's more money to go around, to last longer and do what you want with. But really the benefit of doing the estate plan or the benefit of doing the retirement plan is the peace of mind that it gives you. Because if you don't have a plan, you're not sure. And that worry weighs on you over time. So to me, for you guys, the real benefit of sitting down with someone like Gary or myself, or even discussing your situation with your lawyer or another financial professional such as your insurance advisor, is the peace of mind once you get an idea of what actually is possible. You know, I want to address another thing that no one's come across yet in the line of questioning, but I've seen it a number of times on my side of the table. When I ask people about, you know, legacies and giving to charities as part of their estate plan, they go, oh, no, we don't have that kind of financial resources to be able to do that. And when I ask them what do they mean by that, I go, oh, well, you know, we don't have like $100,000 that we can afford to give to a charity. And that's just it, is that they're not aware, you know, that they can do that for much less. It doesn't have, you know, they hear the word endowment, and that's the first thing that pops into people's mind is a six-figure account.
They think Rockefeller or Carnegie.
Yeah.
You
know, they're not thinking 10,000 plan or a 5,000 plan or a $25,000 plan that might very well be well within their budget.
Yeah.
Gary, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, you know, we talk to young people about contributing on a regular basis to an RRSP or a TFSA, even if it's $25 a month. You can contribute to the Niagara Community Foundation the same way. And that's what my wife and I did in establishing the two funds that we have. So you know you can have two, right? Make sure this guy opens a week.
You brought your mother-in-law today.
Besides just the Grimsby Fund. You know, you can contribute to it regularly, and it's like investing. When you contribute regularly, it grows, and you're surprised at what it will grow to without much pain. The same thing can happen regarding contributing to the Niagara Community Foundation.
I just would like to take a quick moment to tell an anecdote, a personal one. I lost, a number of years ago, I lost both my parents to cancer, 9 months to the day from each other. And my mom was a university professor, and my dad was a chemical engineer. They worked extremely hard their whole life and provided my sister and I everything and more that we could have ever asked for. My dad, unfortunately, got cancer first, but one of the things, on top of being an engineer, he was actually a very savvy investor. He did it on his own, but he also worked with some financial expertise. My mom, the English professor, after my dad died, had no idea what this was. So she worked with a portfolio manager and a financial planner. Within weeks, so my mom unfortunately passed away in 5.5 weeks. From when we heard the word cancer to when she passed, she was gone. There was no time at that point, and even myself, her son, being in the philanthropic sector, there was no time for me to work with my mom to get something into their estate plan to offset the capital gains that my parents were going to pay when all of the assets had to be liquidated. If my dad knew what the tax bill was, he'd be rolling over in his grave. So there are things that you can do with your favorite charity, the Niagara Community Foundation, Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Cancer Society, the Alzheimer's Society, PASO, whatever your passion is. If you write into your estate plan so we couldn't retroactively make a donation. I was one of the executors of the estate. I couldn't make a donation on behalf of the estate and get that tax receipt. I asked, and the lawyer said, no, you can't do that. Because that was my thought, was, well, what if the estate makes the donation? It doesn't work that way. It's got to be in the will, right? So that money, by hook or by, no matter what, is going to go. So ask yourself, do you want to pay the government in taxes? Or would you like to pick your favorite charities?
Yeah.
The government actually wants you to do this. They make it easy for you. They want you to make donations in your estate, to work with these allied professionals, to do that. So there is a benefit for your estate, a tax benefit, even when you are no longer there. That receipt can be used by your estate to mitigate taxes on part of that. Yes, Patrick?
So a bit of a curveball. So
I had to bring them.
this, of course, Wainfleet is an agricultural community.
Yes. Yep.
And one of the big things sort of sweeping through the entire agricultural sector across Ontario is called succession plans.
Right.
And maybe Chris, you know a bit more about these, where it's succession from one generation to the next, which also includes a combination of property and estate activity at the same time. Are you starting to see opportunities that way? Is that starting to emerge? Because it's, you know, when we have an estate plan and a will and a succession plan, it starts to get confusing. But are they not all sort of similar?
It is all part of the same discussion, and I mean, what you're talking about is basically the increase in the value of agricultural lands. You know, any number of cash crop farmers, income poor, whole life, they die, they're suddenly rich, and that's just the way of the world. And there are some, you know, incentives and exemptions available for full-time farmers, but I've forgotten where it is, whether it's 800,000 or $1 million. It's in that range of capital gains tax rate. But I'm seeing clients that are sitting on, you know, $4 and $6 and $8 million increase in their portfolios. It is all part of the same discussion, and that is truly the financial planner, the accountant, big time, dealing with the tax issues, and the lawyer, to come up with a plan that achieves the goals. Sometimes there's a succession plan, and this is where fair and equal with kids. You know, you've got 4 kids, one of them's worked his whole life on the farm, and yet when dad dies, he's out of a job because it has to be divided 4 ways, and you've got to address that issue in your own mind, in your own family dynamic. And it's an age-old problem. There's no easy solution, and each situation has to be tailored with the best financial input. But I can't commend enough the capital gains treatment of gifts of securities to charities. I keep preaching this. I only have one member of my congregation that figured out years ago. They're sitting on, you know, portfolio of Bell shares that Grandma gave them back in 1958. And they just, you know, invested the dividends. You know, they don't need the money, they don't use it. But there's a huge capital gain there that's going to be taxed at top marginal rates when you die. But you could, over the period of years during your lifetime, start parceling it out to your favorite charity, whether it's your church, any one of the number of regional charities, or the community foundation to establish a fund. It's a real benefit.
And you didn't mention there is no capital gains tax on securities that you donate to a charity.
So
But
you're
you get the
about
market value as the donation.
Yes, sir.
So you get the benefit of the increase in value from the tax perspective, but you don't pay the tax on it.
I always look at it and say, you're only sending part of the money. You're also sending government money to the charity.
Yeah. So when you make forward, again, round numbers, if someone makes a cash donation, you're pretty much getting around, depending on your tax bracket, et cetera, please correct me if I'm wrong, again, round numbers. About 50 cents on the dollar is what you're gonna get back in terms of tax relief. If you make a donation through stocks and securities, you're basically getting 75 cents of that back. And that back it just means less tax that you're gonna pay, right? So that's a great way to do it. In our annual report here, there's a wonderful story about a lady named Dorothea Thomas, who had Scotiabank stock from 19 whatever, and her financial planner, her investment portfolio manager, who worked with the Niagara Community Foundation in the past, said, when you pass away, you know, the capital gains on this is going to be massive. So she made the decision to open up a huge fund with us. Don't get scared by the zeros, because it's all scalable, but she was passionate about the environment. So it was a $5-6 million gift that came to the Community Foundation because of stocks and securities that she'd had forever. She's not married, no family left, except for her one nephew, who also encouraged her to do this. Make this impact while you're alive, and then you're not taking the hit on the capital gains. So it's another savvy way that people can make good decisions, but you chat with the professionals. And so Larry, there is some upfront money to talk to your lawyer. I mean, not necessarily to talk to these guys, but then you're making really good decisions as opposed to not knowing what to do and being frozen and paralyzed by indecision, and then at the end, it's all going to go to the government.
I'll just ask Gary for some of my money back to
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
You might have to go back to work.
That's right. Yeah.
I'd just like to actually piggyback
Sure.
on that a little bit, and this will show you how self-interested I am in this whole thing, is that it's actually easier for me if you give your money to the Niagara Foundation, simply because I am the broker of record for local churches, food bank, etc. And so for guys like your dad that did it on their own,
Yeah.
and then gift the individual securities, well, now we got to deal with their board on, is this a good time to sell these gold stock shares that we got from this person or another? And they're not necessarily financially savvy, and it makes my job more difficult. So yeah, I would rather that we plan and do something today instead of doing it on your own and then be having to deal with giving advice on when to sell the individual securities to the individual charities.
Yes.
So, before we got the curve over there, very simple question. So if I make my will and I have charities listed, whatever,
Yep.
that will be done and that will help me in my tax situation.
Yeah. And for people with registered funds, RSPs or retirement income fund, I keep trying to tell my clients, don't look at that as part of your estate. You got $100,000, when you die, that's only $50,000, because it's going to be fully taxable at the top marginal rates. If the bequest to the charity or the gift to the charity is in your will, that can offset the tax that you would otherwise be paying in your final return. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, so I have my financial advisor, which we're starting to plan our retirement, you can say. And he suggests that we start at the age of 95 and work down and start planning what kind of life you want to, well, I don't know what kind of life you want to lead at 95. Hopefully it's a quality life, but go down. And in no time did he mention, as a financial advisor, talk to my lawyer. We already have our will set up. So they're not talking to each other. And this whole conversation is bringing to light that we really need to go back and do our homework at home, because my partner and I were common law. So it becomes a little bit more of a touchy issue. I'm on the title of the house, he's not. So what happens if he passes away and the children want to come in and take that?
I do a wills presentation, and one of the two things I ask people to take away, I'll say it again today, is don't let anyone tell you that living common law and being married is exactly the same after a year or 3 years or 5 years. It's not when you die, and it's a disaster. And you really do have to come up with a very robust plan. And it may involve you and your spouse dealing with different lawyers, because one lawyer is in a conflict of interest, potential conflict of interest, for acting for, in blended families are the other big, where you come into a marriage, a second marriage, and you've got kids, and your spouse has kids, and you want to, I want to make sure my spouse is provided for, but then I want to make sure my kids get it when she's done with it. Well, as soon as you die, it's not your estate anymore. So you have to come up with a plan that meets the needs of both of you. And sometimes that can get very involved. But by all means, please tell anybody you know living in a common law relationship, you have to have a will. Because if you die and it's not in the will, your spouse is then a trespasser in that house.
Yes, so.
You need to provide for that.
That's interesting, because we have one lawyer and he did both wills.
It can be done, but it all depends on the circumstances. But sometimes it's like negotiating a prenuptial agreement sometimes, getting to these, because, as I said, people say, no, I want to make sure my spouse is provided for. But then when they're done with it, I want my kids to get it. I don't want her kids to get it. Well, it doesn't work that way, because as soon as you die and it goes to your spouse, it's not your property anymore.
Yeah, because this is bringing out to light, because we don't have a charity in anywhere in our plan. At 95, I just can't think that far ahead. I'm sorry. But it's coming by, it's coming close. But this discussion of having all parties come together is just a wow factor for me. So I'll
It's
be
really-
punching your business cards.
Yeah, it's really important, and I actually, after what happened with my parents, I had my own tax accountant, and I actually stayed with the portfolio manager that my parents had selected. And then I had another allied professional that I was working with, and I literally brought everybody together for a beer, and I said, everybody now knows each other. Everybody now knows to talk to each other. So when I'm like, you're my team. So I physically did that so there would be no gaps. Now, maybe I was really like them. I played hockey with one of them. My tax accountant I played hockey with for years, so going out for a beer with him was easy. But you're my team. You're my team, to Ken's point. So anything that the Rose family is doing, I'm gonna rely on the three of you for your advice and your counsel to make sure that what happened with my parents and the mess that my aunt and I had to clean up, and actually my mom had to clean up before unfortunately she passed, doesn't happen, right? So I did that very deliberately, but it could just be an email conversation. But yeah, get those groups to talk, and chances are you might find out they actually know each other, right? And could work well together. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes. Gary, did you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to suggest to all of you that probably the best planner in the room is Kelly Robson. She's the only woman I know who, when she got married, all she had to do was drop the 3 middle letters in her maiden name.
There you go.
Bryan, I'm going to
Yes.
throw a curve in because
Curveball.
Well,
We like curveballs.
and it's one of the reasons I believe in the Community Foundation is there was a national news story about a week, 10 days ago, the national charity, and this is charity education.
Yes.
Know your charities, know who you're giving to.
Yes,
And it kind of came out as a shock.
yeah.
that 52% of every dollar they raised was going to fundraising costs and administration. Now, this is not unusual, folks.
No.
Bryan, what's the current ratio of administration costs for the Community Foundation?
It's probably 10 cents on the dollar
Of earnings?
of earnings, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I talked about Imagine Canada before,
Yeah.
the gold standard of accreditation in the philanthropic sector. Their magic number is around 30. So if you can spend 30 cents on the dollar or less on your operations, you're doing really, really well. The foundation, we are a lean organization. We run very efficiently. Suzanne and I are half our team, sitting here, right here with you today. And the foundation that was built, no pun intended, by my predecessor, is extremely strong. And we are very heavily reliant on our amazing board of directors. We've got a great governance structure, and then also the volunteer committees that we have in Port Colborne and Wainfleet and Grimsby. And Niagara on the Lake, et cetera, right? So that's how we're able to work very efficiently. But, some org firms, like the Canadian National Dog Association, whatever it is, I mean, it's a competitive market for charities. And yeah, you gotta spend a little bit of money to make some money. Now, 52 cents might be a little high, but you gotta pay Ben Mulrooney to do all those,
And he needs the money.
and apparently he needs the money. So, anyways.
So the other one is, I have not kept track. Rate of return, the last couple of years for the community?
Yeah, rolling rate of return was just over 6% net of fees. So any fees that we pay out, so.
Yeah. But that's, as I said, I kept asking, could you invest my RSP, for my retirement? Because I'm doing a lot better than I am and my financial advisor. So it's,
Yeah, I mean, that number is probably going to take a little bit of a hit after 2022, but.
But even in the melt, I was on the board in 2008.
Yeah.
And, across the market, huge meltdown. Community Foundation continued to make the grants that they had because, again, it's a very sophisticated investment strategy. Bryan's not, is it still with Toronto?
The majority of our assets are pooled with the Toronto Foundation, so part of our funds, so called 55 million, is pooled with their 400 million. So again, it's economy of scale. So again, our fees are drastically low because we have an economy of scale and an opportunity. And because our endowment is 75 to 80, depending, we're waiting for our year-end numbers. You know, the larger we get, the lower the fees are for everybody. So yeah, that's how we operate.
One of the important things I think people need to understand is that when you talk about the 10%, you're talking about the 10% of the income made on the original investment. The original investment, the gifts, are staying in perpetuity.
That's right, the capital
That's
stays
not being
protected.
touched. That 10% is not coming off of your fund. It's coming off of the investment of the fund.
Right. Yeah. Well, wow.
Yeah, Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we pass it back to?
I have a silly question.
Sure, go ahead.
A silly question.
That's
If I
silly.
wanted to leave you a parcel of land
Yes.
and you could be the owner of it for 10 years, hoping that it would triple and be developed, is that?
We could do that. It's a little bit out of our realm, but the short answer is yeah, we could do that. Ideally, the challenge with that is then I become a landlord and or an owner.
This is empty land.
Yeah, empty land. So for us, the stretch for the Community Foundation is our raison d'etre is to support and give money back into the charitable sector. If I'm holding on to an asset for that long, it sort of muddies the water a tiny little bit. Now we could, as long as there was an agreement that after 10 years, you can go ahead and liquidate it and sell it, and then get that money into the charitable sector, we would be much more open to that sort of conversation. I've heard of community foundations that have been bequested or been given buildings, and they will accept them because then they have tenants that pay rent, and then that money can then be used to support the charitable sector. So there are nuances. As Don can attest, you know, Don spent years in the philanthropic sector like I have. It depends is our favorite answer for a lot of stuff. It depends, but happy to have those conversations with anybody.